Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bazaar Overexplained, and we have a very exciting one today as we are revealing 5 new items for the new character Stelle that's going to be coming out in the next season of the Bazaar. Let's get into it. First up here is a familiar face. It is the lightning rod. This is an item that we have actually seen in the Bazaar before that we could get through one of the monster encounters, and now we know that it is officially going to be in Stelle's item pool, and with it comes a bunch of brand new abilities that I'm super excited about. So it is a large weapon. It says when any player freezes or slows, deal 30 damage. It also says when an enemy freezes or slows one of your items, this is targeted instead. So wow, some really cool and powerful effects there. One of the biggest one that jumps out to me is just how much it is going to counter our opponent's freeze and slow. We've seen how powerful that freeze and slow builds have been in the past in the Bazaar. Thinking about like Pygmalion's freeze builds were always super potent. Vanessa had some incredible slow builds and could do so many slow triggers and just completely slow you out of the game. Lightning Rod basically counters that. It puts all of that onto this item, and it's going to be dealing damage to our opponent for even trying to freeze or slow us, which is really cool. But also there's a super interesting clause here in this word, when any player freezes or slows, deal 30 damage. So not only can this be a cool defensive item, it can be a really potent offensive item if we are creating a lot of slow or a lot of freeze triggers for our board. Notably that this is a passive effect item. It does not have a cooldown, so it's just going to statically check to see if there is any freezes or slowing happening in a battle, and then it's going to be dealing out that damage. If we can find a way to pump up that damage, and let's say we get this to 100 damage on our lightning rod, we're essentially taking any slow or any freeze trigger and doing 100 damage, which is super, super potent and strong. There are already so many ways in the Bazaar to create slow triggers, and it looks like with Stelle's item pool that we're going to be talking about here soon, there's going to be even more ways to create these triggers. So the lightning rod, a great defensive item, a great offensive item, and it's going to pair nicely with some items that we have coming up next. The next new item that we have here is the Ice Bomb, which seems really interesting. It gives us a brand new mechanic in flying. It is a 4-second small item that says freeze one item for 0.5 seconds at silver tier. Maybe this goes up. It has 1 ammo, and then it also says when this goes off, it stops flying. It also has a status clause that says when this item starts flying, reload it. So we're looking at a brand new mechanic here, and let me give you a little bit more information. I'm going to read this verbatim from the developers of the game. They've given us some information on what flying means. So flying is a binary status that items can have. So it's basically saying an item can either be flying or not flying. Flying has no duration, so once an item starts flying, it will continue to fly unless another effect makes it stop flying. While an item is flying, the duration of slows and freezes applied to that item will be halved, so it only applies to new freezes or slows, not ones already on it, which is a pretty big thing to note. It also says a lot of items in Stelle's pool care about items that are flying. Some of them care about how many items are flying or how many items are using items that are flying. Other items are going to be caring instead about when items are not flying or when they start or stop flying. So this new keyword here is one that, again, has this interesting effect where it is going to basically take the crowd control from our opponents who are trying to slow and freeze us. It's going to halve that duration, which is very powerful. But it also is going to potentially give us some buffs as our board is going to check to see for that flying status. So what I assume that we're going to see from the Stelle pool, and we'll look at some other items later, is that we're going to be seeing items that give that flying type or give that flying status to items on our board, whether they are directly giving it to it or it's like a percentage chance. Let's say like we have an item that will go off and say give an item flying on your board every 3 seconds or something like that, or if it's like give the item to the left of this flying, that we're going to have to still see. But it's a new status and ability that's going to be introduced here into the Bazaar, and one that I think is going to make for some interesting gameplay. Something that could be very good. Ice Bomb itself, it seems like a rather innocuous item, but what we've seen from a lot of small items like this in the Bazaar are that they're great enablers. So we see this as a 4-second cooldown that's pretty quick. It also has that freeze for 0.5 seconds, which is not nothing to say the least, but it has those two clauses where it starts flying, it's going to stop flying, and it has ammo on it too. So there's a lot of great little enablers pieces that can come from this, especially if Stelle has, again, as we know, items that are going to check to see if things are flying, and potentially even if she's going to have items that are going to check to see if you have used ammo. But with that, let's keep moving on and look at some other items. So the next item for you here is Sirens, and this is one that we have seen before, but again, is going to be directly into Stelle's pool. We kind of, I think, as a community had guessed that a while ago, given Stelle's themes of kind of mechanics and racing and things of this nature. And there it is, we have Sirens that is going to be officially be in her pool. It is a medium item. It says it has a 6-second cooldown. At that 6 seconds will slow an item for 1 second and will also haste an item for 1 second. This is what we see at silver tier. It also has a very interesting clause on here that says for each adjacent vehicle or property, this has +1 multicast. So at that 6-second mark, we could be slowing 3 items for 1 second, which is pretty interesting. If we're capitalizing on this in the correct way, we can look at something like dock lines in comparison. That's going to be doing the slowing a little bit quicker, but it's still going to be slowing multiple items. And then also hasting other items, 3 different items for 1 second. I think that this is actually rather powerful in the right builds. What we see generally from like a vehicle build in the past is you're going to have one vehicle that is going to be like your primary enabler or damage dealer. However, we just don't know all of Stelle's items at this point, but if that is the case and we don't have a lot of items with cooldowns themselves on board, we have a lot of items that have like static clauses, then we're likely going to be hasting our vehicle. And then obviously if that is our primary damage dealer and we're going to be hasting that, that's the item that we would want to be going quicker. So we're maybe going to be hasting that, we're going to be hasting Sirens, and then we're going to be hasting something else, and then our board is going off repeatedly. I think that this could make for a pretty good mid-game item if we're especially caring about slow and haste triggers. We've seen how these slow triggers and haste triggers have equated to damage in the past with different items like on Duel or different items on Vanessa that see those triggers and convert those triggers into damage, and it looks like that's what we're going to be getting here with Stelle too. So the Sirens could be a pretty nice enabler for like the slow archetype or a haste archetype if that's what the archetypes that we see in Stelle. And just from the items that we're seeing thus far, I think we're probably going to be getting some more of that. So really excited for how they've changed Sirens here. And yeah, this one may look a little innocuous, but I think it's going to be pretty powerful once we actually get to playing with it. And next up here, we have Weather Machine. So we've seen the Weather Machine before in one of our non-player fights, and then now we are going to be having that item here again in Stelle's pool. So pretty exciting here. It is a large vehicle, property, and attack item, so it has 4 interesting tags there, especially knowing that it has that vehicle and property tag. That's pretty cool. It is on a 5-second cooldown. It says at this gold tier, 2 items start flying. So it looks like that's going to be potentially random on our board. And then it also says freeze an item on each player's board for 1 second. And then it also says slow all items for 1 second. This item, I think, is going to be pretty powerful here, specifically because of that slow all items for 1 second keyword. We've seen that be really powerful in the Bazaar before, especially with something like a plasma grenade that's going to be slowing all the items on our enemies' boards, or something like shot glasses for Vanessa that slows all our items. And the reason it's so powerful, again, is because of what we were talking about before. We can potentially convert these slow triggers into damage or into some other way to enable our items, and that is going to be super, super powerful. Anything in the Bazaar, I feel like, that says do something to all items is one that you got to look out for. And the Weather Machine being on a 5-second cooldown, especially if we're putting it next to our Sirens, we're going to be hasting it up, having it go off like every 2.5 seconds. It's going to be having that trigger. That'd be really, really interesting. Notably, it does slow itself, so you would be wanting to potentially negate that by, again, having haste or charge. but we could be creating just a ton of slow triggers for our items that want to see that. And talking about some of the other parts of this item, so that, yeah, freeze an item on each player's board for 1 second. That's a really interesting clause there, and we'll see if Stelle has a lot of items that really want to be freezing or check to see if we are freezing. I can think of something like a giant ice club from Pygmalion that, is converting that freezing to damage and stuff like that, or at least charging. So we'll maybe see if Stelle has something like that. I imagine she does. And then that top clause there, 2 items start flying. So what jumps out to me is that we have a large item at gold tier that has this enabling clause of 2 items start flying. And the reason that jumps out at me is that it might be indicative of how difficult or how much of a barrier to entry or bar to entry that there is for an item to fly. So again, gold item that is large, not that easy to acquire. It looks like it has a sell price if you're at 12, but generally it's going to be 24 to buy it. So 24 gold to get 2 flying triggers. So that's really interesting. And I want to see if having these flying triggers are going to be like super impactful, and you'll only need a couple of that flying trigger to enable some of the other items, or if we need to stack up just a ton of flying triggers to really make that archetype worthwhile. But again, we're going to have to see all that. I think all together, though, the weather machine looks super interesting. I think that this is going to be, if I can take a guess, a really nice build enabler, just because of how many different things it is doing. And maybe you're putting it in a flying build and you're not caring about the freezing or slowing clause, or maybe you're just putting it in a build that only cares about the slowing clause. I think that there's a lot of room for us to explore this item here, and I'm excited to start playing with it here soon. And the last item I have for you today here is the Wrecking Ball, which potentially is the coolest item out of all of them. It is a medium weapon. It has a 20-second cooldown, so that's quite a bit. It deals damage equal to 30% of an enemy's maximum health. So that is a ton of damage. It also says destroy an item. So presumably we're also destroying an item on our opponent's board. And then it has this last clause here that says when this starts flying, charge this 5 seconds. So if we can get this flying for 4 different times, we are going to have the item be fully charged and go off. And what will be interesting to see is how much we can enable that flying trigger to get something to start flying or stop flying. Again, if this is a binary effect, I presume, are going to have it both start and stop flying for it to then start flying again, or to basically get another flying trigger out of it. So it's like a yes or no kind of situation. I assume that an item that is currently flying cannot get another instance of flying. We'll see how that all pans out. But if that is the case, then the Wrecking Ball takes some enabling. It really reminds me of something like a powder keg, but that destroy item clause is really, really potent and powerful. And one thing that they did tell me here with these items is that, all the numbers that we see are subject to change, and these could certainly be changing by the time that they come out. But if this item remains as is, starting at gold, doing 30% of our enemy's max HP, that's already a tremendous amount of damage. If we can find a way to give this crit, we're doing 60% of the enemy's maximum HP, which is certainly a ton. And then we're also destroying an item on their board. We've seen just how powerful that item destruction clause can be with dually items like the dinosaurs that dually has had, and how that took over the meta for a little bit. So the Wrecking Ball is something that, again, if we can get enough flying triggers on the Wrecking Ball specifically, this item could certainly destroy our opponents. I'm thinking, again, when we're looking at the items that are going to be enabling flying, the one that I only have access to here is that weather machine, and that is going to, what looks like, give 2 random things on our board flying. So it's not guaranteed that it's going to be hitting our Wrecking Ball. And ideally, for a Wrecking Ball is our primary damage dealer. If it has no crit, it's going to have to go off 4 times. So there's a lot of setup that we have to do with this item, But again, just doing as much damage as it does, I think that this could still be something that's very, very potent. One big thing here that we're going to have to take into account is when this gets to diamond tier, is this going to be able to do 50% of our enemy's maximum HP, or how the numbers are going to change on this thing. I imagine Tempo has seen in the past how like powder keg crit builds were one-shotting opponents, and they had fixed that in one of the recent patches, and I'm interested to see if they want to introduce that back into the game. But again, looks like flying might take a little bit of work to make this do its thing, but it still could be very potent at the end of the day. So let's take a look at all these items together here and wrap up. So again, we got the Wrecking Ball, we have Sirens, Ice Bomb, Weather Machine, Lightning Rod. We have a lot of really cool items here that are coming to the Bazaar, and a lot of really cool designs that we're seeing iterating off of things that, again, items that we've seen in the pool in the past, but they have all brand new effects. I think, again, the Lightning Rod might be the one that I'm most interested in, but out of all these items, I think that there's a lot of really powerful synergies for us to play with. I love how the Lightning Rod is, again, going to be checking to see if we're freezing and slowing. And then with the Weather Machine, we could maybe have both of these things on our board, and maybe put, again, the Sirens next to it. And then our Sirens are going to be going off, slowing all of our enemy items. And then we're going to be having our Weather Machine that's going to be slowing all the items. It's going to be triggering our Lightning Rod a bunch and stuff like that. Maybe we can find a way to pump up the damage on the Lightning Rod when we're doing that. And then we have these really cool enablers and packages that are going to be, again, checking to see what is sort of a thing that we see in the past across all characters, which is slowing and freezing. And then we can have some really cool synergies with that. I also think something like the Ice Bomb, again, might be a really cool role player in some of our flying builds, where we're going to want to see a lot of flying triggers, and we're going to want to see that stop flying trigger specifically. And if that is the case, then Ice Bomb could do some really good work. And I mean, hey, freezing an item for 0.5 seconds is not nothing. I think we would want to, again, have this as more of an enabler instead of trying to build around it specifically. But we can see just how powerful that sort of effect can be with something like the Wrecking Ball, which is going to be doing so much damage, 30% of our enemy's max health, which is just a ton. And on top of the fact that it's going to be destroying an item, if this thing can go off multiple times, I mean, that's going to just completely destroy our opponent's board, and that's super exciting. But yeah, I have all these items up here. Feel free to take a screenshot of this and share it with your friends and things of this nature, because I know we're all super, super excited for the new Stelle items coming out here in the Bazaar very, very soon. And with that, I am the Bazaar Whisperer. A big thank you to the Tempo team for sending me these items and working with me on this. This has been something I've really wanted to do for a while now, and sharing some upcoming content with you about the Bazaar always feels good. So with that, I appreciate you watching me here, and I hope you have a great rest of your day or evening.